Welcome! This is part 8 of 8, the thrilling conclusion of the Black Road Sky version 0.3 tutorial series. And in this video, we'll be tackling interplanetary transfers. As you see, I've dressed up for the occasion. I've saved my finest bottle of malt liquor for this final video. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, before getting to the actual interplanetary transfer, let's take a moment to talk about making inclination changes. In the last video, I borked up a rendezvous because I didn't notice that my relative inclination was like 10 degrees off. So let's take a moment here to talk about what I should have done to avoid that. I put myself in a pretty similar situation here. I've got a relative inclination here of 18 degrees. And I want to rendezvous with this station here. So let's say I didn't notice that my relative inclination was way off, and I'll just try to make the rendezvous as I normally would. That looks good. Fine moment. Flip into warp, and let's just get as close to the station as we can. At this high of a relative inclination, we're not going to get close enough to get kicked out of warp. That's about as close as I can get. I dropped out of warp manually, and I'm still over 1,500 kilometers away from the station. Not great. So let's see what I could have done differently. There are two icons here on top of my orbit, which you've likely noticed. You'll get those icons when you have a station targeted. These are your ascending and descending orbital nodes. The ascending node is the arrow pointing up. The descending node is the arrow pointing down. These are the points in your orbit where the plane of your orbit intersects the plane of your target's orbit. And the ascending node is where your orbit passes from below to above your target's orbit. The descending node is where your orbit passes from above to below. And these are the ideal points for making inclination changes. So what I want to do is to warp myself to the nearest node. Doesn't matter which one. In my case, it'll be the descending node. And we don't have to be perfect. Just want to get myself more or less on top of it, like so. Now I'm at the point where my orbit is passing from above to below. So what I want to do is burn normally, basically burn up. If I were on the other side, I would want to burn down, or anti-normal. This is easy to get confused. So if you get it wrong, you should just activate thrust deflectors. As usual in cases like this, I'll start by applying just a little bit of throttle. Make sure my relative inclination is doing what I want it to do. It is. So I'll throttle up a bit. My normal marker there is going to migrate slowly to the top of the nav ball. That's what I want. So I'll use a little bit of attitude control to keep my nose on the marker. I'm watching the nav ball for that reason, to keep my nose on the marker, and then I'm also watching the numerical readout of the relative inclination. Under 5 degrees is good. Under 2 degrees is great. Let's just get it as close as we can. There we go. About half a degree. That's fantastic. So after making that burn, we get a much better idea of the relationship between our orbit and the orbit of our target. There's a pretty decent gap there. That gap used to be in the y direction, which we can't see on this 2D map screen. So now that my relative inclination is low enough to be negligible, I'm in good position to do something. What am I trying to do here? I'm trying to intercept the station by making the burn radially outward here after flip-flopping around. A moment. That looks pretty good. We can be particularly accurate if we want to by taking a look at our periapsis. This is about 140 kilometers. The altitude of the station is about 120 kilometers, so close enough. We'll charge our warp accumulators, get ourselves pointing in the right direction, and see what this approach looks like now that we've got our relative inclination under control. Almost got kicked out to warp by another station there. And I'm just going to let it drop me out. Much better. That puts us within 500 kilometers of the station and in position to make a nice, clean approach. All right, enough about that. Maybe should have gone over that earlier, but I didn't. So I went over it now, and we can get to the main topic of the video now, which is getting out of Dodge, man. There are 3 more planets to visit in the system. There's Afro, another rocky planet orbiting much nearer to Solus. Gimgul, which is a gas giant with 4 moons. And the dwarf planet Mictlan, way out here on the outskirts of the system. Mictlan's the most difficult planet to rendezvous with, just because of its small size as well as its great distance away from the rest of the planets. Gimgul's the easiest one to rendezvous with, and also probably the most interesting, given that it's got 4 moons to visit. So let's take the middle path today and get ourselves to Afro. I'll set the planet as my target and zoom out here. As always, plenty of ways to get from point A to point B. I like to take things one step at a time, and I will first break orbit with Lua. That will put me into an orbit around Tyra. I will then break orbit with Tyra. That will put me into orbit around the star Solus, and from there I'll make a approach burn to Afro. Just like we have in the past, we'll want to depart from Lua in the direction of its motion. In this case, the direction that I want to go happens to have a moon in the way, so I'll warp around to a more desirable point in my orbit. And we were kicked out immediately by Collins Station. That's alright. I'm going to put a little distance between us and Collins so that we can continue on our way. Safe. So that puts me on an escape trajectory from Lua in and of itself. But I do want to adjust that trajectory a bit, just to be safe. Okay, that's fine. I just want to be departing more or less in the direction of the moon's motion. Wrong way. At some point, I'll leave Lua's sphere of influence and be recaptured by Tyra. There we go. Now, I want to do the same thing, escape from Tyra in the direction of its motion, which is something like this. We're not in a great place to make this maneuver. I'd like to do it sort of near the top of my orbit there. I'm going to go ahead and warp myself there. This is going to take some time, even at full warp, because we are in a 12-day long orbit. So that quarter of an orbit or so is a pretty significant distance, and would have been a significant amount of time were we not using warp. I think that's where I wanted to be. It's good enough. Boost mode. I'll throttle up. Put myself on an escape trajectory. We'll warp off again until I leave the gravitational influence of Tyra. On the in the orbital map, here's the closest view. Zoomed out once, zooms out far enough to see Lua. Zooming out again, zooms out to the edge of Tyra's sphere of influence. So I'll want to get myself to the edge of the map here. That's about where I'll officially leave Tyra and be captured by Solus. This is a pretty significant distance. And at full warp, it's going to take me a little bit of time to get there. Not too bad, but something you can do, and I don't think we've done yet, is use the cryopod and warp in concert. Just save a minute or two of our lives. There we go. That pops me into Solus's sphere of influence. Drop out of warp, and let's get a handle on the situation. So here we can see we're basically in the same orbit now as Tyra. 370-day period. In order to meet up with Afro, I'm going to do probably what you would expect me to do. I'll warp myself to here, then I'll lower my orbit to meet the planet. Really didn't need to drop out of warp there, but good excuse to take a break and get hydrated, yeah. Now here's a situation where you really want to use warp and the cryopod in concert. I'm at 100% throttle, and you can barely even tell that thing's moving. Alright, 100x feels good. We'll be making correction burns as we approach, so no reason to obsess over getting this perfect. But this is a great place, I think, to drop out of warp. I'm going to spin around, point myself retrograde, so that I can use boost mode to drop my orbit down to meet Afro. And then we will continue warping. Pretty good. I mean, it's hard to tell because I can start to see. Warp accumulator charged. Flip back around. Get ourselves close. How about there? And let's see what's going on. Let's get a look at the situation here. Make sure I'm targeting Afro. I am. And I can see here that I do want to make a correction burn at this point. What I want to do is get my prograde velocity level even on the nav ball with the direction of the planet. At this point, I'm sort of shooting above it, and I'm still whatever that number is. What's that? 4 million kilometers away. It's a lot of kilometers still to go. And over the course of that time, this discrepancy is just going to grow and grow and grow. Much like what we talked about at the very beginning of this video, those inclinations, relative inclinations, make a huge, huge difference. And in this case, over these enormous distances, it's even more pronounced. So I am at risk not just of ending up far away from the planet, I'm going to completely miss its sphere of influence. I'll never even have a chance to be captured by it, unless if I make a correction burn here. So I want to move my prograde velocity down to somewhere around here. In fact, I'll try to get it basically pointing right at the planet. And to do so, when I burn, the prograde velocity is basically going to drift towards the direction of my burn, or the direction of my nose. So I'll put myself right about there. And in this case, this directional marker is still visible. We can still sort of see the prograde marker, so I could just go ahead and burn. But I will show you one slightly jankety feature that we have not yet explored, which is that I can rotate the nav ball by clicking and dragging. It is it's rough. It works, but it's very confusing. Something about quaternions, Wikipedia, that shit. I don't know. I will be improving on that feature, but basically you left click and you move the mouse until you can sort of get the view you want. This is helpful. Really, the only time I ever use this is when making correction burns during interplanetary transfers, because sometimes these markers are far enough away from your nose that you just can't see them, and you have to rotate the nav ball a bit. This red warning light turns on to remind you that you are out of your home position, and that the middle of the nav ball here is no longer your nose. I'm gonna flip into boost mode, throttle up, and again, just trying to get my prograde direction pointing at the planet. That means I'm moving towards the planet, which is perhaps obviously what we're trying to do here. And this isn't the only way to make this maneuver. In fact, it's not the best way. All of this velocity, forward velocity that I'm adding, I'm going to have to burn fuel later to nullify it. But it is, I think, the most straightforward way, and it works. Throttling down, that was I would say a successful correction burn. In order to reset the nav ball, all you have to do is right-click, and we're back in home position with the nose front and center. And we can continue warping on our merry way. Alright. 15 light seconds away. I'm not going to worry about hopping in the cryopod. I'm going to throttle down here just so I can talk about what's happening. Watching this distance, if that starts to go up, we've overshot. If you overshoot, a perfectly valid strategy is just to go throttle back up, warp back around, make another correction burn. It's gonna you're gonna lose some time, but I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. As I approach, I'm watching this deviation, and it's starting to bother me. There's the planet. Oh, I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it happening. You want to keep your eye on the sphere of influence here, but I did. I am in Afro sphere of influence. Perfect. Let's say I wasn't. My trajectory wasn't quite right. Then what I would do at this point is make another correction burn. So we're here, moving in this direction. We could make a capture burn here that would put us in an orbit like that, which is clockwise. That's not what we want. This is a good point to move my trajectory into a more favorable position. I could let myself get captured here and then reverse my orbit, but we'll use a lot less fuel by burning radially here to set myself up for success. This is also not coming anywhere near the planet. I'll want to put myself in a closer orbit than that if I can. So let's see, in boost mode, that does. Throttling down a bit here, because I can combine a couple burns here. I know I'm also going to want to lose a bunch of velocity. I'm going to want to burn retrograde. And this is another a situation where it can be handy to move the nav ball around. So often yaw around in the exact wrong direction. So here I can see there's prograde, so I know where retrograde is. Somewhere over here. I'm gonna burn radially with a little bit of bending a little bit towards retrograde there, so I can start to burn away some of that velocity. Watch this line. We can also watch the numerical periapsis readout. We want to get that on the other side of the planet. Also watching eccentricity. That's being manipulated by that bit of retrograde velocity primarily. Remember, eccentricity of less than 1 is orbit, so we are nowhere near that. My periapsis is going to start moving in the other direction here pretty soon. That looks good to me. Worth noting, my inclination here is a little bit bonkers. 60 degrees. And as I said, the ideal place to make those inclination changes are your orbital nodes. But in this situation, I'm just going to go ahead and do it right now. So we can see I'm shooting sort of below the planet. Oops. So I'll want to burn here, and I know what I want is for this marker to be on the top of the nav ball. So I have sort of a visual representation here of how far off I am. Try to make this in maneuver mode. And it's happening. You can see my inclination drop in. But it's taking some time. Let's try boost mode. I'll put myself like here-ish. Into boost mode. Okay, that's about as close as we could get. 28 degrees, still a fair amount of inclination, but what was it before, like 50 or 60? So even though that wasn't the ideal place to make the maneuver, still put us well on track. Let's go ahead and warp ourselves to the planet. Here we go. Now, ideally, if you were really careful and you set everything up right, you'll end up near the equator of the planet if your inclination was close enough to zero. Ours wasn't. It's not a big deal. If I take no action at this point, I'm just going to blow right by Afro. And so we'll point retrograde. This is a big velocity change I need to make. Pop into boost mode. And burn. Watching my eccentricity here. I need to get that bad boy below 1. We're at 100. So this will take a second. My inclination is getting worse. So not a bad idea to adjust the direction of my burn, not dramatically, but we may as well get that inclination moving in the right direction while we are throttling down. And there we are. We made it. We are in orbit around Afro. Inclination of 20 degrees. Not bad. we could put more work into perfecting this orbit, but there's not a lot of reason to. I think the next step typically would be to find the station that is your final destination. Cool UI, bro. I mean, you can. They're all kind of overlapping, but there's the three stations around the planet. Let's say where we want to go. Let's check out Ubuntu City. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to finish the rendezvous for the sake of closure. And while some past version of me does that, I'm gonna finish this 40 and just sort of talk about the future of Black Road Sky, because this thing's nowhere close to being done. But the fact that it's just like it's playable and mostly working is some sort of I'm very proud of it. It's some sort of miracle, honestly. I don't know. It's some combination of a miracle and a lot of work. But I got a lot that I still want to do with the game. What I'm working on right now is well, these tutorial videos, but moving on, I'm redesigning the ship. The ship, it's so stupid. It looks like shit, and it's one of the first things I made when I started making this game years ago. And it's always just been a placeholder. So I'm making an actual sort of sensibly designed ship. And some cool things that this will allow me to do is to make the ship modular and customizable. I want you to be able to sort of pimp your ride. That will have no bearing on the gameplay, I don't think. It'll just be sort of a fun thing that you can do. But I also need the ship designed to support space trucking. So currently you take a contract and it says that this or that is being loaded onto your ship, but there's obviously nowhere for it to go. The goal, the plan, is that you'll be actually hauling shipping containers, much like a real-life semi-truck. I'm really like leaning into a Euro Truck Simulator in space sort of vibe here, where there'll be shipping containers. You'll back your ship into it and basically dock with the shipping container and then haul it. And that shipping container will have weight. That weight will affect the way your ship handles. And there's a lot of things like that. Sort of details that I want to put in there. Right now, like your fuel doesn't have weight, so a full tank flies the same as an empty tank. That all of these things are going to actually, the consumables aboard your ship will actually have a mass, and there will be more consumables than just propellant as well. Because once I'm done with the ship redesign, moving on to the thing that I'm probably most excited about with this game, which is implementing detailed ship systems. From the electrical system, which will involve a basic simulation of electricity within the ship, management of batteries, as well as a fusion reactor. There's heat management system, the coolant pipes and radiators, and all of the existing systems are really just placeholder, from the warp to engines, sensors, communications. All of these systems are going to be expanded on. The cockpit's just going to be all the fucking buttons. So many buttons, gauges, and dials. That's really what I want. A lot of tactile cockpit controls. Another thing that's always been part of the plan. I'm not sure how much of this I'll end up getting to, because I'm one dude, and this I'd like to finish the game before I die. But I'd also like for there to be hardware aboard the ship, interactable hardware. Part of the ship redesign is to build an engine room where these components will exist. For now, it'll just sort of be a set piece. Uh, but eventually, I would like for all these different components, hardware components aboard the ship to be interactable, upgradable, repairable. Uh, so that the idea is that there'll be preventative maintenance as well that you need to do on the ship, which will sort of like give you things to do other than drinking a 40. Well, in the moments of downtime of the game. Um, what's coming after that? After that, now we're talking, I don't know, a long way down the road, but I want to round out the different provinces, which currently in the game, the provinces are just names on stations. What other games would probably call factions, I'm calling provinces. There's no sort of warring uh, disagreements. This is a very hippie sort of view of the future where everybody's getting along. The different provinces I want to round out so that they all have unique station designs. There's also going to be a reputation system, so have work to increase your reputation with different provinces, and I'd love to part of that reputation system. I want there to be rewards for reaching different levels of reputation, and one of those rewards will hopefully be different mission types rather, so that it's not just pure space trucking. I mean, all the missions are going to be basically like get from this point to that point, but I'd like to do things like refueling, rescue missions, responding to SOS calls, and things like that. And that'll be part of rounding out the fleshing out the 5 provinces. And then what else? What else are we gonna add? I mean, I'd like to make it so the game doesn't completely look like shit. That would be cool. I don't know that I'm capable of it, but I'm gonna give it a shot. And other than that, what else? More planets. There actually were more planets in the previous version of the game. I got rid of a bunch of them just to make sort of simplify things and give myself less debugging work to do. And maybe some sort of storyline. If I had any sort of storyline, it'll be optional, I think. I wanted to. The game's primarily a space trucking game, and it always will be. But I have I've really built out the universe of this game quite a bit in my head, and maybe I'll play with some of that eventually. But that's sort of last low priority stuff. What do you think, Chickadee? You don't give a fuck, do you? You just want pets and food. And I guess that's it. This is the end of an embarrassingly long series of videos that I suspect no one will ever watch, but that's cool. Cheers. And I've saved my finest bottle of malt liquor for the occasion. So, really can't open it. Really can't open it. Holy moly. Yeah, I guess we're still going to redo that intro.